Today we're going to cover an oil change for a Toyota 2AR-FE engine, found here in a 2011 Camry. It's also in a few other Toyota products. To do this, you're going to need a new oil filter. In this case, I'm using the OEM filter that comes with the oil filter element and the O-rings for the housing, as well as a crush washer that my local dealer provides for free with the filter. You can also find those at stores to replace your existing crush washer when you do the change. We'll also need oil, so in this case 0W20, which is what's rated and called for full synthetic for this engine. Let's get started. If we look here, we have a diagram of all the components included: the filter, the O-ring, and the pan and gasket, and how they go in order. Before we drain the oil, we'll open up the fill cap and the dipstick to allow for air to flow freely so the oil drains more easily. Using a 3/8" drive wrench with a extension and 14mm socket, we're now going to break the oil drain plug free. You don't necessarily need the extension, I just like to use it so that I don't wind up with oil on my wrench if possible. With the drain plug loose now, we'll take it out the rest of the way with our hand and try and not drop it in the pan like I do here. And then we'll let the oil drain out completely. Next, with our 3/8" drive tool and our oil filter housing tool, we will remove the oil filter housing from the bottom of the vehicle. Located on the passenger side of the engine. When removing the housing, you want to go slowly and carefully to make sure that you don't break the plastic housing that the oil filter cartridge resides in. Once the housing is loose, you can take it off the rest of the way with your hand. There is also a way you can drain it using that silver metal piece at the bottom. I typically don't. It's just faster to just take the whole housing off and dump it slowly and carefully into your pan. After we get the old oil and element out of the filter housing, we'll take it, clean it up, and then we'll take a piece of paper toweling and squeeze it together on the O-ring to make it pop up so we can take it off without any tools that may harm or damage the thread. Then we'll take our new O-ring, place it carefully on the oil filter housing, and make sure it's properly seated all the way around in the correct channel so that way we get a good seal when we put the filter housing back on. Then we'll take our new filter element and click it firmly into place inside of the oil filter housing and make sure that it stays in place when we move it up and down with the spring load. Then we'll take some fresh oil on that newly seated O-ring and rub it on there to make sure that when we seal it back up it doesn't bind, and then we get a good seal when we screw it into the engine block itself. Now we're ready to put the oil filter housing back on. We'll start it with our hand to make sure that we don't cross-thread it or go too tight at all to begin with. After we get it on hand tight, then we'll take our torque wrench set to 18 foot-pounds with our oil filter wrench attachment accessory, and we'll put that on to the oil filter housing and make sure that we tighten it down until we hear the torque wrench click, meaning that we've set it to 18 foot-pounds. You want to listen for that click and don't go any further than that because you could over-torque the housing. And there's our click sound, so we know to stop. Earlier I dropped the drain plug, so I'll take a magnetic tool now in a plastic bag to fish that back out. We'll clean up our drain plug and put a fresh crush washer on. The crush washer is what's going to help it not leak when we put it back on. So we'll clean up the surface, and then we'll use our hand again to start it and get it hand tight. Then we'll come in with our torque wrench again, set to 30 foot-pounds, tighten it down until we hear that same click. Now it's finally time to fill the engine up with fresh oil. Since we did a drain and we did a new oil filter cartridge, we're going to need 4.6 US quarts for a full drain and fill. So we'll take our 5 quarts of oil from the store and pour in 4 quarts is typically what I do first to start with. Once I get to 4 quarts, I'll stop there, make sure that the dipstick is reinserted, make sure that the cap is back on, and then start the engine, check for any leaks underneath the car, and then let it sit for a minute or two, check the level, and then fill it up again with just a little splash of oil. Then put the cap back on, and then get the vehicle started up, warm it up, get it on a level surface, and then let the engine run for a minute or two, then shut the engine down, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then check our level. What we should be seeing is what we have here after we had done that, where the fill level is right up to the top, so we know that the oil crankcase is full and that everything will get the adequate coverage of oil that it needs when the engine's running.